Hi everyone, this is Hong Kong, Oscar from Disruptors Asia. It's Monday, 1 o'clock here. And I've got another guest also in Hong Kong. I don't know if it's free will or not. Graham, how are you today?
Good, thanks, Oscar. Good to see you.
Where exactly are you?
I'm at home right now. I'm at home because it's absolutely pouring with the rain outside, so chucking it down. So yeah, I'm at home.
So, because we just had a chat before we actually went live, because you travel quite regular, well, overseas. You just came from Indonesia, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I was in Indonesia in March, and that was my last trip. I was going to see my family, who are based there now, and got back early March, and then of course that was it. You know, the lockdowns, the Cathay stopped flying, quarantine Hong Kong, quarantine Indonesia. So it just stops all travel.
I mean, it's been, well, that's probably an understatement. It's been a pretty, how to describe that, a challenging year for photography in the last 12 months, if probably even longer. When did you actually start with photography, Graham?
When did I start?
Yeah.
I started. My father used to give me cameras from when I was very young. So when I was about 8, 9, 10, my father, who's a good, keen amateur photographer, he always used to buy, the latest camera, the latest SLR, and then he would give his old SLR to me, the single lens reflex with the changeable lenses. And so right from an early age, I was always given cameras by my father. And then I think when I was 14, he gave me a cine camera as well. So then I started making movies, cartoons. So for me, it started from a very young age. And I always saw my father taking pictures. So I always wanted to take pictures. And I just immediately took to it and loved it.
But you studied graphic design, is that correct? Or you actually studied
Yeah.
photography?
Yeah, I studied graphic design. I went to art school and did that in Ravensbourne, London, I graduated in 85. Because I remember back then, when I was at school, my favorite subjects, were kind of geography, art, and physical education. And the art department basically said, why don't you go to art school? Because back then, there weren't that many, I don't know whether there were any photography courses back then. So photography also seemed to be of a bit of an esoteric kind of career, and it seemed to be hard to get into. So I decided to go to art school and do graphic design.
So why were you thinking, or at the time at least, photography is very hard to get into? Was the
I guess because it just seemed like a um, one of those careers that would kind of be difficult to get into. Primarily, I think, because there weren't any courses around. You couldn't go and study. So I
and
think you either had to know a photographer or you had to, become an assistant or something. So I guess, and it seemed like a very competitive, tough career as well. I imagined, to get into and to compete and stay in. So it seemed to me, graphic design seemed a little bit more of a easier career path.
so how long did you do graphic design? So you finished the study, and then you actually went on as a graphic designer, or your first
Yeah,
job?
that's right. Yeah, I got my BA honors in graphic design, and then in 1985, and then I studied. I mean, then I worked up in London for a year or two, and then I went around the world, worked in Sydney, and then I went to the US, worked in New York. So I was 7 years doing professional graphic design before I switched to photography.
So what happened after 7 years?
After 7 years, I just got very frustrated being in an office. I got very frustrated being in an office. Every weekend, I was always out. When I traveled around, I circumnavigated the world, I think when I was 23. And one of the reasons I went around the world because of my interest in photography. I love photography so much. That was a great way to go and almost like be a photographer every day because you're shooting every day. So I went around the world for a year, and went back to London after that, and then after that went back to New York. But all the time, especially in New York, every weekend I was out, Saturday and Sunday, I just used to go out and shoot on the streets in New York. So I was kind of building a portfolio on the streets in New York. And then I furthered that by going around the world. I left New York and went around the world and ended up in Hong Kong. So again, I was building my career on that path around the world. And then when I got to Hong Kong, I had quite a good portfolio together.
And you got stuck here. I mean, when did you came to Hong Kong? That was part of the trip around the world, or
it was part of the trip, and I actually had my residency to go and live in Australia. And when I got to Southeast Asia, I actually went to Singapore first. And Singapore, going from New York to living in New York to living in Singapore was a complete opposite and a completely wrong thing to do. Going from the most exciting city in the world to back then was near one of the most boring. Not so much now, but back then, New York, Singapore, absolutely wrong move. I went through Hong Kong on the way, and Hong Kong seemed to me a little bit more like New York, with the skyline, with the pace. It seemed a bit more like the 24-hour city that I loved, that was New York. So that's why I spent 3 or 4 months in Singapore and then decided to go back and live in Hong Kong.
Because what was the reason why you went to Singapore?
Because when I was living in New York, I went to Singapore on a trip to do some work on a job, and I quite liked it. I quite liked the Southeast Asian, atmosphere.
And that was the first time, Singapore?
No. I actually been, when I left England when I was 23, I went around the world and I did the Southeast Asia on a shoestring thing. And I went through, my first stop off with India, and then I went down through Southeast Asia all the way to Australia. I remember my favorite place when I went around the world the first time this was in 1986 or something. I remember the two most enchanting places that had a really big effect on me. One was Bali and the other was Tahiti. And those places were just so stunningly beautiful. And Bali had the culture, the architecture, the many very visual place. So I loved Bali as well. So I was really enamored with Asia after that first trip.
So at the time, what were you actually photographing? Landscape or architecture?
No, people. I was always interested in shooting people. Always people. Whether if they happened to be landscapes, architecture, cityscapes, whatever. I always try to get people in. People have always fascinated me in terms of shooting. And that's where New York was really great. New York was a really great training ground to shoot people, to shoot street photography, because in New York, it's, the people there can be quite brash, it can be quite aggressive. You can, you walk across an avenue and all of a sudden you're in a safe avenue, and then all of a sudden you walk across 1 or 2 avenues and all of a sudden the whole neighborhood has changed, and all of a sudden you're being confronted by, drug addicts, guys with guns, whatever. So it was a very challenging, but a very good learning ground to shoot people, because I found in New York, every street corner was like a theater set. You walk around, because back then, that's when graffiti, in the early 80s, graffiti and all that wild style, the breakdancing, all that stuff came up. I remember every street corner was a theater backdrop. So you had very interesting people, very interesting backdrops. Almost impossible to shoot good pictures in New York on the street. So that's where I really honed my skills for shooting people, and also, which also I think is really interesting. It kind of honed my skill for confrontation and arguing and confronting people and being confronted and having to get what you want out of a situation and get out of it as well. So, and that I learned all that pretty much in New York, really.
How did you learn that in New York? People will say, bugger off, or like, how do you ask people?
Bugger off would be a nice, lovely, soft. No, I remember one guy I was up. Sometimes you'd approach people and ask them because they look interesting and said, do you mind if I shoot you? And quite often, you'd get all sorts of rude answers back. And I remember one guy on the Lower East Side, his name was Tito, Puerto Rican immigrant. He looked at me and he said, you know what, you can, but I'm telling you, if you'd approached me 5 years ago, I would have robbed you. And then he went on to tell me about how he'd just got out of prison. He'd been in jail for 5 years. He'd just been in jail for, he said, he basically used to wear this overcoat and he had a sawn-off shotgun beneath it. And he used to pull out this shotgun and rob people. And so it's quite interesting. He said, 5 years ago, I just would have robbed you. I said, but I'm just out of jail. So, you know what? Yeah, you can. And I became his friend. And that was really interesting. And it was good for me because on the Lower East Side, if I ever got any trouble with people, I just used to tell them I was Tito's mate. And then they're like, whoa, okay.
Really?
Yeah. And sometimes he used to come around with me as well. He used to accompany me on my photographic trips around the Lower East Side. And of course, I'd never get in any trouble.
So what attracted you? I mean, were you mostly in the, let's say, the rough areas of New York? I mean, were you hanging out there quite a lot?
Yeah, the rough areas always attracted me. And that's always been the case too, to my own detriment, quite a lot. It's been when I've traveled, there's a dark, dangerous looking alley with some dark, dangerous looking people down there. I'm just drawn to them and I just can't help myself. And I walk down them and then of course, sometimes you get in trouble, sometimes you don't. But I've always found myself drawn to troublesome situations, confrontations. It's kind of always interested me and I always feel that's where you get the best pictures. And that's where you can be the most interesting experiences in life is when you do confront your fears or confront certain dangers. And if you come out the other side, it's an interesting experience. And that's what builds you. That's what builds your character. And that's
how do you judge people like that? Like say you walk in, you've been to some rough areas, but is this quite subconscious? I mean, how do you approach people? Because it could go really wrong. People say, well, no. Like Tito was a nice guy, but
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, definitely. You can definitely see that. I always feel it's your approach that determines the outcome of the situation. So, if I go in there and I'm a bit of an aggressive asshole, I'm probably going to get. I'm probably not going to come out very well. So I've always found that obviously when you compliment people, that always works. Smile. Approach, with a smile and and just you definitely have to judge before you make that move. You have to judge and think, am I going to get in trouble here or is it going to be worth it? And then you assess. You also have to assess very quickly whether you have to get out of the situation or whether you're going to stay and push it and try and get some interesting pictures. You have to judge that, and I think that comes from your own judge of character. But definitely for me, it's always your approach. And it's what you give out. That's what you're going to get back quite often, I found.
So, of course, I will also want to talk about the introduction that you have on your website. So you've been to the Middle East. You've been into some, let's say, precarious situations there, by the sound of it. What happened in the Middle East?
And Middle East, well, the Middle East, I've been there a few times. I went there in 2001. The reason I went when the Afghanistan war in 2001 kicked off, I went after 9/11. I went there because I was based in Hong Kong, and I remember after 9/11, all my work just stopped completely.
So you were in Hong Kong at the time during 9/11?
Yeah, during 9/11. Yeah, during 9/11, I remember all my work, all the corporate commercial work, everything. I remember stopped. Everyone stopped commissioning. So I figured after a couple of weeks of that, of everything just drying up, I figured why not go where there's work? So there was work at during the Afghanistan war. Not that.
You make it sound so logic. Well, there's no. I just follow where the work is, so I go to a war zone instead of staying in Hong Kong.
Yeah, it was obviously. Again, it was what I was saying earlier. When you get drawn to, I get drawn to dangerous situations. It just seemed, you know, I'd never shot a war before, so I just figured, let's try it, let's go and see how it goes. And so before I left, I remember I got all my finances and everything together, wrote it all down, sent it to my brother, and I told my brother where I was going, and I said to my brother, please don't tell my family, don't tell mum and dad, sister, anyone, please just keep it to yourself. And I said, this is where everything's kept, just in case, you know, because you never know, if you don't come back, you want to leave things in good order for people to find. So
you really had thought about that things can...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think before you go into a conflict situation, you definitely have to come to terms with the fact that you may not come back, and you've got to weigh that up. Are you prepared for that risk? Do you want to go and do it? And how much pain and hurt is it going to be for people around you? For example, I obviously wouldn't do it now because I'm married with 2 kids. So I would never do it. Not for $1 million, I wouldn't do it. But back then I was single. So it was you've only got yourself to really worry about. And obviously if something happened to you, obviously your parents are going to be upset, but it's not like you've got immediate family. So that's what made it easier, a lot easier to do. Now I wouldn't do it, absolutely not.
So did you discuss it with anyone before you went to Afghanistan or to the war?
Just a few friends, mainly my friends in the journalistic profession, you know, some writers. And because also you had to find how to get in there. I mean, when something like a war kicks off, you can't just book a flight, get a visa and say, I want to go there. You can't get in quite often, right? Because the borders are closed, or you can't just land in Kabul on a flight and say, okay, where's the nearest hotel? So first of all, you have to find out how you can get in. So that's when you have to speak to a lot of journalists and a lot of people that were also going over there. A good friend of mine, Dan Grashon, he was just about to go. He passed away a couple of years ago. He did a lot of conflicts. So I spoke to him quite a bit and got advice, got ideas how to get in. He went ahead of me. He was there about a week or 2 ahead of me. So I had a little bit of knowledge about how to get in. So then I remember calling up a Hong Kong travel agent saying, I want to go to Afghanistan. And they were like, where? I was going, Afghanistan. Like, you know, there's a war happening right there. Right now, there's a war there, Afghanistan. America is bombing the hell out of the place. They're still, no. So right from the start, it was difficult because no one even, the travel agency hadn't even heard of Afghanistan. If I'd said it in Cantonese, maybe easier, Afuhan, but.
What about online? Were there any online tickets?
No, back then, no, this was in 2001.
Okay.
So
you decide, well, so how did you actually get to the place, Kabul?
Afghanistan. To Afghanistan, it was really hard. It took me about 8 days to get there from Hong Kong. I had to fly Hong Kong to Delhi, Delhi to Afghanistan, Delhi to Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan to Tajikistan, and then you had to go across land, Tajikistan, and then you had to get to the border of Afghanistan and then get in across the border. So and then each of those countries, they were ex-Soviet countries, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, they're all part of the ex-Soviet bloc. So you had to get visas to get in. And you couldn't get visas because it's just, you couldn't at the time. So I went to Delhi and I went to leave Delhi, and I got to the airport and I said, I had my ticket for Uzbekistan, and they said, you can't leave. Why? Because you don't have a visa into Uzbekistan, you need a visa. So I just basically talked my way through Delhi immigration, and I got them to let me on a flight to get to.
What did you say to them that they just allow you to?
I just said, I've got to go. There's a war there. I've got to go and shoot a war. And I had a letter from the picture editor at Time magazine in Delhi, and I had a letter saying that Graham is going to cover the war in blah blah blah, and please let him, please let him get in. And amazingly, they let me through. So I turned up at Uzbekistan, and they say, immigration, get off. Immigration says, where's your visa? I said, well, I don't have one. And they're like, what do you mean what do you mean you don't have one? You're trying to come in our country and you don't have I said, yeah, I don't have a visa. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get to a war. I don't have a visa. So they look at me and they say, go and sit over there. So I'll go and sit down. And of course, I thought, you think you're going to be locked up now. But they let everyone else through off of the plane. And I'm the last one sitting there. Then they come over to you. And then of course, they say, so you want to come in our country? You want to come
Yeah.
I'll give you a 3-day visa and it's going to cost you, and I forget how much it was, 100 US or whatever it was. So, and then that happened with Tajikistan as well. So you just had to kind of bribe your way through and to get into the country.
8 days, well, that's a bit of a trip. So, and then when you arrived, did you already knew people there when you arrived? Because I think there were, I guess, journalists and photographers.
There were quite a few journalists in massing in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe, because that's where you would go to try and get access. You got to go from Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan. You've got to get across land, and you've got to get across with people who know where they're going. It was like Mad Max. We found this convoy that was going down, a convoy of vehicles that were taking journalists and medical workers and aid workers, and we found this convoy that was going down. So we got a ride on this convoy, and the last, I remember getting down there, it was really surreal. The last hour or last couple of hours, it was like a 10-hour trip or something across land. And the last couple of hours, it was just, there was no roads. So you were just, it was like Mad Max. We were going, all these trucks, and was going across this kind of semi-desert, arid landscape, and dust flying up, and it was just, and then by nightfall, we reached the Afghan border. And then when we got to the Afghan border, the Northern Alliance were in control. The Northern Alliance were friendly to the allies, Western allies. And I remember getting into a hut, and they said, right, so you want to go cover the war? And they're like, okay, we'll give you a jeep. We'll give you a jeep, and we'll take you to the nearest place that you can actually find somewhere to sleep. So we're like, me and 2 other journalists, we're like, great, this is fantastic. You're going to give us a jeep? Yeah. So this is great. So we got in this jeep. So we got a driver, new soldiers, they're soldiers, army jeeps. You've got the driver, and you've got a guy riding shotgun with his AK-47. So we get in the jeep, start driving. In the middle of the desert, this is at night, pitch black, middle of the desert, they stop the jeep, and they turn around and they say, $300. That's US $300. And the guy's sitting there with his gun saying, 300 US. And they just stopped the car. And then me and the other 2 journalists were like, okay. And we just said, no, I'm not paying. He said, and he's got the gun. He's like 300 US. And they're both looking at us. And we just said, no, not 300, no. And then there's a very uncomfortable, what seemed like an eternity, silence. And then they said, like 250. And we're like, no. 200, no. And it's, at this point, your heart's really going, because you don't know whether they're just going to shoot you and just kind of rob you anyway. They're you out in the desert. No one would ever find you. No one would know. No one would care. So there was always that. When you have these confrontations, there's always, you have to weigh up, how far am I going to push this before I get punched or I get shot, or it's going to end up badly. So we got them down to 150 US in the end, which was expensive for a half-hour trip across the desert, half-hour taxi ride. It was 150 US, but we got it down to 150 US in the end, and paid them, and then they started the jeep up, and we drove.
So you brought a lot of cash with you, I guess, then? Well, because you kind of expect that you have to pay everything cash there.
There's no ATMs in Afghanistan. There's no ATMs. You had to bring, basically, I had a backpack with some clothes. I had a bag of film, because this was in 2001. This was just before digital really kicked off. So I had a bag of film in one hand. I had a backpack with some clothes. I had a camera bag, and I had another bag with food. So you also had to take your own food in, and some water, because you didn't know whether, you don't know what you're going to come across when you're there. So anyway, we got to a Northern Alliance compound, and we were able to stay there, and we were able to pay them some money, and we just ate rice the whole time we were there. We just ate rice and drank tea. and bread. So it was bread, rice, and tea.
How long did you stay there for?
I was inside Afghanistan for 2 weeks because, like you said, you had to carry cash. So I took enough cash with me that I thought it's going to last me a month, 2 months, 3 months inside Afghanistan. It lasted me 2 weeks because the Northern Alliance were stealing from us, because they said, you want to go out today, you want to go to the front line, 200 US. Everything was like 100 US, 200 US. You know, you want some toothpaste, 50 US. You know, it was very much so. And there's nothing you could do if you wanted to get to the front line. You had to get a letter from the guy that sits in that office, and that guy that sits in that office, Northern Alliance guy, he would say, yeah, you want to go there? That's it's $100 for the car and $100 for the translator, because you need a translator. We're not going to let you go on your own. So it ended up, we were just like, every day you were just like 200 every day, which again I wasn't expecting.
How did you even get back? I mean, that you had tickets already, a return ticket?
I had to buy tickets on the way back. It took me 9 days to get out of. It took me 9 days to get from Afghanistan to Hong Kong, because, again, I remember why. Again, it's conflict all the way. I remember I got on my plane in Uzbekistan. We got on the aircraft. Everyone was on. Put my bag in the overhead baggage compartment. Sat down. Seatbelt on, just waiting for takeoff, and a Uzbeki like Secret Service guy gets on the plane with a general behind him, and he's looking around, and he walks up to me. Of all the people, he walks up to me and he points at me and says basically, you off. Excuse me. He's like, you off. And then, of course, the whole plane turns around, is looking at me. I was the only Westerner on the plane. And then he's a big guy, and I'm like, I'm kind of, okay, I'm going to see how far I can push this. So I said, no. I said, I'm paying for this seat. I said, there's my baggage ticket. There's my seat boarding pass. My bag's there. I said, no. I said, I'm staying here. And he's like, leaned right into me and he said, now. Off. He's like, off. And he starts to get really aggressive, and everyone's like standing up, looking. And then I realized, okay, I'm not going to win this one. So I picked up my bags and they threw me off the airplane. And as I got off, I was cursing in English. I was putting like 15 swear words together, saying MF, and one of the stewardesses said to me, well, that's not very nice language, is it? She spoke quite good English, because not many people spoke English. So I was just swearing. I was so angry. And then the cabin crew said, oh, that's not very nice language, is it? And I was like, F you. So I got off the plane and I had to wait 3 days for another aircraft. There's only one aircraft out every 3 days. So there was all the way along, it was, with this job, photography, particularly editorial and reportage, documentary, there's a lot of conflict involved, and you're always confronting people, whether it's you're asking to take a picture or you're trying to get in somewhere, you're trying to get access somewhere. You're always having to confront people, and so you've got to get used to that. You've got to get comfortable with confronting people and trying to get what you need out of the situation and come out intact, as well. So that's happened a lot in my career with that kind of photography.
How many pictures? Because you said this was before, was basically film. So you took a whole bag full of film with you.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks. Was that enough for 2 weeks? I mean, I don't know.
I'd probably. Well, yeah, because back then you would be very careful. Not like nowadays where you see photographers, they put their finger on the button and then they just, look, 2,000 pictures later, they're like, oh, okay. Back then, you had to really be discerning. You really had to, you really looked for the moment with photography. Taking photographs, you looked for the moment and you waited, and then, boom, when you got it, you always knew when you got it, and then that was it. But of course now people are just like, 3,000 pictures a minute, and they're just like blanket covering everything, and later on looking and wondering what they got. But in the days of film, you couldn't do that. You had to know what you were doing. That's why there were far few far less photographers around then, because you actually had to know what you're doing. Now you don't really have to know so much, because the camera is doing a lot for you, and you can check the camera, and the they're so advanced now, cameras. It's and then of course shoot raw. You can change everything post production. So that was the difference back then, is that you were far more careful about how many pictures you shot. Because if you went into Afghanistan with 50 bags of film, 50 rolls of film, that was it. You had 50 rolls of 36 exposures, and then that was it. Once you were finished, you'd have to get out.
So no one's been trying to steal the films. I mean, that's quite a bag full of films that you carry around all the time.
Well, yeah. I've had Chinese customs steal 25 rolls from me when I went into China once. I remember they took 25 rolls from me. And then another time, a tuk-tuk driver, I was arguing about a fare. I put my bag down on the tuk-tuk, was arguing about over 50 baht. And then the guy just puts his foot down, takes off with my film. So I remember back then, I just spent 3 days on a vomit cure farm, where heroin addicts went to this vomit cure, went to this monastery in northern Thailand, and were cured from their addiction by vomiting. They'd make them vomit, like twice a day. And so I remember spending like 2, 3, 4 days there, shooting loads of film, got back to Bangkok, and then lost all the film, lost it all. So I had to go back and do it all again.
Oh, really? You went back?
Yeah, I went back and shot the whole thing all over again. Yeah. So that was a drawback with film. Definitely was limited by the amount of film you could take, and then easier to lose.
And that was editorial.
That was all editorial. Yeah, that was all editorial, because when I first started my career, that's what I was mainly doing, was editorial, and then got into corporate commercial later.
So when did you make that switch from, let's say, editorial to, I think, more, you do a lot of aviation. How did you get involved in? I looked at the videos, and for the viewers here as well, every video I've seen is like almost like an action movie, the way you shoot this.
Right. Yeah. The reason, I think that's another thing. I think if you're interested in something, in life, you can kind of edge your way to it. And I've always been interested in aircraft. I've always been a plane spotter. I love aircraft. I love them. So I've always been interested in the subject, and I guess I gravitated towards trying to get work at airlines and with the helicopter company here, and that was really also because of my love of aircraft, my passion for shooting aeroplanes.
Because you made that, let's say, went from film to digital, and then you kind of changed to video, right?
Yeah. I got into video. I started to do video in about 2007, because back then it just seemed to me that a lot of the advertising and a lot of the promotion would be done on your handheld device, and your handheld device is quite often, it's going to be video playing, YouTube or whatever. So websites. So that's why I started to get into more video. But then along the way, I turned a lot of my video into promoting myself. So I started to do a lot of behind the scenes videos, shooting, getting my shoots shot, and making behind the scenes videos for self-promotion. So I've used video a lot for my own self-promotion as well.
So that was I guess, a bit of a steep learning curve, going from photography to video editing.
Yes, to video editing, definitely. Yeah, I remember to get into video editing. Shooting, there's not much of a problem. There's not so much of a problem. There's not too much difference. If you're good, keen at stills, you can quite often, manage video, and quite often vice versa. But the editing, I remember I bought Final Cut Pro, and with Final Cut Pro, you get a stack of instruction manuals, like you get like 9, I think, or something, and they were this thick. And so I remember when I first got Final Cut Pro, I just locked myself in my apartment for like 4 or 5 days over Chinese New Year, and I just, for 18 hours a day, I over that 5 days over Chinese New Year, I just taught myself video editing.
Wow, good. So that's an ongoing. The one thing actually I forgot to ask, because what happened with the bodyguards of wasn't Bill Clinton's bodyguards? Where did you meet those guys?
Yeah, Bill Clinton. That story came about in 1998. I think it was 98. It was when Bill Clinton visited Hong Kong for 24 hours, and he was invited to give a talk at the Hong Kong Exhibition Centre. And he was invited there by, I think, by the American Chamber of Commerce and the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. So a few weeks before this, I was asked by the HKTDC to send in, my passport details, and I had to go through background checks. It's about three or 4 weeks before it happened, because they said Bill Clinton's coming, and we want you to. We were only allowed to have. It's like the Hong Kong government. We're allowed to have one photographer that's going to be at the front and photographing Clinton when he comes to give his speech. So, and they said, we'd like you to do it. So after checking my credentials, the day of the shoot came, I remember we had to get there at 7 a.m. and we were briefed things that you can and can't do and places you can and can't go, etc. And all the media were kept at the back. Like all the media, the worldwide media was like 30 meters or more at the back of the auditorium.
What were the things you weren't allowed to do?
Well, obviously you're not allowed to with the VIPs. You're not allowed to go within 10 feet of them, or there's certain distances that you can't go. There are certain areas. They said to me, you can't go in front of the barriers, and I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, that goes over your head. And they said after reading out some rules, they said basically you stick with the White House photographers. There are two White House photographers there with Clinton. Two White House photographers go everywhere with the whole entourage. So they said, stick with the White House photographers and you'll be okay. So I'm like, okay, that's an easy brief. So the first, and actually I've got some pictures, because I found some pictures that I'll show you to illustrate the story. Because so when I first met Clinton, here's Clinton here. He's just coming out of a tunnel. There's a tunnel here. So backstage, this is backstage. Back here, that's where we met him first, and we're photographing him. He's meeting dignitaries and shaking hands and talking. So we spend a little bit of time with him back here, and then that's the chairman of the TDC, Victor Fung. And basically, my brief really is to get the picture of Victor Fung with Bill Clinton. Right? Victor Fung is the chairman of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. Bill Clinton, that's the picture I've got to get. That's why I'm hired. Right? I've got to get that shot. So my first mistake was when they came out of that tunnel, all these people were massing behind us, and I'm walking out backwards shooting, and I nearly walk into I nearly bang into Hillary Clinton. So Hillary Clinton is standing next to Madeleine Albright, and as I go, there she's there with Madeleine Albright. As I go to step into Hillary, I get a short, sharp jab in my kidneys by the Secret Service. Go boom, and they don't just say, stop there, sir. They're like, they are short, sharp, and they're like bang, and I get a nice short, sharp jab in my kidneys, which like stops you, like, oh, and they kind of push you aside. So my first mistake was I nearly stepped on Hillary. Then I decided to stick, like the brief was, stick with the White House photographers. So I was just sticking with them. So the two White House photographers went behind the barrier. So my brief was stick with them and I'll be okay. So I went behind the barrier with them, carried on shooting. Then a Secret Service guy comes over and says, out. And I was like, well, I'm just with them. And he's like, out. So I stepped outside the barrier and he said, no, out. And I said, no, I'm staying right here. And he's like, you've got to get out, buddy. I'm saying, I'm staying right here. So there's a nose to nose. And then this is what in front of everyone, right? Bill Clinton's giving his speech. I'm nose to nose with this Secret Service guy. And he's saying, get out, buddy. And of course I can't, because my job here is I'm shooting on behalf of the host, the Hong Kong government. So I waited around a little bit, and then I heard from my client who came over to me and she said, the Secret Service are very pissed off with you, and you may have to get out. And I was, well, I'm staying here. So then the lady that was in charge of the Secret Service, she comes over to me and she says, buddy, she goes, it's over. You're finished. You're out. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not. finished. I'm not over. I'm not out. I'm staying right here. And so, and of course, you don't speak like that, right, to the Secret Service. You know, they're the boss, right? They can do whatever they like.
But what exactly did you do so wrong apart from the walking back?
I stepped inside the barrier. I stepped inside the barrier. You know, I made a few feet error of judgment. I stepped inside the barrier because the White House photographers went inside the barrier. And I was still like 10 feet from Clinton. I wasn't like climbing on stage, doing a selfie with him or anything. I was just still, so she was in charge of them, and she was super angry. And you don't tell her, right? She tells you. So anyway, I told her where to go. So she can't eject me there because I'm right in front of the whole, you know, the hundreds of people in there. Clinton's giving a speech. They can't like, you know, like cuff me and take me out. So I waited there. When Clinton finishes his speech, the brief was he was going to come down from the steps. He was going to go along the first row of dignitaries, shaking their hands on the first row. The shot I had to get, obviously, was the shot of him photograph with him with Victor Fung. So as he walks down the front row, and he's shaking all these people's hands. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting when he gets to a lady. Can you see the Bill Clinton when he gets to shake a nice, pretty lady's hand? He's very attentive there. It's very interesting. You notice all these things. So, and as I'm doing this, as I'm shooting this, you can see there is an arm there. But as I'm shooting this, 2, 3, 4 Secret Service guys move in on me, and they start working me. They start punching me. One would punch me in the kidneys one side, spin me one way. Another one would punch me in the kidneys the other side, spin me the other way. And they were trying to disorientate me, and they were trying to disorientate me so they could like get me out. So they're hitting me on either side, and then one just pushes me straight into a massive freestanding speaker, the big PA systems. So he propels me into a speaker, and I bounce back. All the time, I carry on shooting, even though they're punching me and they're spinning me. The thing that they didn't realize is that I've got a black belt in judo as well. See, so I've got a black belt in judo, and my judo training really, they couldn't get me off balance. They were really and they were really clever in how they did it, and they were good, but they couldn't get me off balance. So I'm standing there shooting, you know, like dropping my elbows a little bit to try and brace myself, and they're trying, and I've got all these pictures. Not here, but I've got all these pictures. All my pictures are like, they're all wonky because I'm being hit there, and I'm still shooting. And then it gets to the point where he gets to this. Here's the shot I've got to get. They're still hitting me, and Clinton looks over and sees what's happening. And as he does that, Clinton gets hold of Victor Fung's shoulders, turns him around towards me as if to say, buddy, you better get your shot now because I can see that you're not going to get many more. Because you know, so it's quite interesting. So I was managed to get a few shots off here because you can see Mrs. Fung's eyes are closed there. So of course you have to shoot quite a few, and then in the end, that's the shot. I mean, it's not a Pulitzer Prize-winning shot, but that's the shot I had to get, and that's when the Secret Service backed off. They backed off and left me alone when Clinton looked at me and got Victor Fung and just went, there's your shot, buddy. You better get it. You better get it now. So, you know, I mean, I was very angry about that. I was very pissed off because it was.
But it's amazing that he didn't collapse. I mean, I know how hard it can be in kidneys.
Yeah, well, that's the reason. That's why certain skills you acquire in your lifetime come in handy at different points. And you know, I've done Thai boxing as well. I did Thai boxing, and you know, I was doing judo for many, many years. I was in the British team when I was 19. I got in the under-21 British judo squad. So, you know, I've always been very, not comfortable, but if anyone wants to start a fight, then I'm like, you know, I really don't want to, but when they, you know, if they push it that far, then there's no problem. I'm quite comfortable getting into a fight. So that also helps when you're a photographer and you're constantly being confronted by these guys or security or whoever it is that's trying to stop you. Those kind of things also can help.
So that I guess that's a recommendation for anyone that wants to go to areas that you are going to. You need to do some self-defense practice.
It definitely, yeah, it really helps. I think it really helps. I think the whole ethic too with the martial arts is the fact that you've got to remain calm. You've got to as soon as you lose your temper, right, you lose the fight. So with the martial arts, with judo, you get angry. You can't get angry. You just channel your aggression into what you're trying to achieve. And with judo, you're trying to throw the other guy, strangle him, arm lock him, or hold him down. So it teaches you to channel that aggression and remain focused. And I think that is what happens when you're in situations with photography, and you're in war zones or conflict zones, or you're under stress, you're under duress, you have to remain, very clear, very focused in what you're trying to do, and you can't get scared. As soon as you start to let fear get hold, then you can't go to a war zone if you're going to be frightened, scared, right? It's not going to work. You're going to get in and you're going to be out within a day. So that's something that I think really helped me also deal with all this conflict that I've had, is the fact that I'm confident. If I have to get in a fight, which I don't like to get in fights, but if I have to, then it's quite often no problem, and I'm very comfortable.
Have you gotten into a fight, by the way, doing your job?
I got into quite a few. One fight I got into, I was in Wanchai, and I was photographing a transsexual, and I think she called herself. He was one of these persons that sometimes he was a male, sometimes he was a female. I think they call themselves transsexuals. They're not, I think they're called transsexuals. But her name was Phaedra Kelly. I remember I was in Wanchai. I took her down there to photograph. He was like 6 foot. He was like 6'2" or something. This guy. He had a blonde wig, red dress, makeup, everything. I went round his place, her place, she was doing herself out, and I took her down to Wanchai to shoot for a story. So we're in the middle of Southbourne, where Southbourne meets Jaffe, the crossroads, and I was photographing, and then these drunk Western guys came out of a bar, 3 of them, and they came over and they started saying, you effing queer, whatever. They were just really abusive, horrible language at my subject, the person that I was photographing. They were being really rude to her. And then I said to them, look, guys, would you really mind backing off? Just go off and enjoy yourself, because I'm just trying to do a job here. I'm just trying to photograph. Please, we're not doing any harm. Just leave us alone. And again, I'm always like this. I'm always like, please, I'm very, I'm deferring to you. Please leave us alone. I don't want any trouble. Just, go and enjoy yourselves. And then he said, if you don't get out of my way, I'm gonna, kick your ass as well. And then he grabbed the transsexual's wig and grabbed her hair, pulled her wig off, and then he looked at me and he said, I'm gonna you up as well. So I said, look, I really don't want to. And then as I said, look, I just went boom, and I just laid into him. I hit him like 6-7 times really quickly, then uppercutted him, dropped him on the floor, then got him on the floor, got him into an arm lock, and I was just about to break his arm, and I was like pummeling his head at the same time. And there was like blood. I had this white shirt on. There was like blood all over my shirt where I hit him so many times his nose or lips. And and then I didn't want to do that, but I had to. So then the guy gets up, and his mates across the road, they just stayed the other side. And then they started being more abusive again. He got up and ran across the other side of the road. And then they started to be more abusive. And I said, look, guys, if you want to carry on, you just step back over here, mate, and we'll carry this on. And they didn't. In the end, there was a lot of that, and then they took off. So, yeah, I mean, always situations. So many situations have come up like that for me in my photographic career. Many standoffs with people. Quite often with security guards. I remember Beyonce's bodyguard. I went nose to nose with Beyonce's bodyguard, who was a big MF. He was huge. And he'd grab me by the shirt, rather than just saying, excuse me, sir, just back off a little bit. He just grabbed me by the shirt and and I said, I said, look, you know what? And then I start swearing at him. And then again, I was nose to nose with him. And this was in front of the press conference. So Beyonce's standing over here, and there's a press conference, and there's me and him. And I pushed it to the limit there, because I thought there's no way he's going to hit me in front of all the press, because the press were all, you know, hundreds of press in the room. And so I just started, you know, I fronted up with him and I said, you know, and there was this big standoff. Now, if I'd met him in a quiet street in a dark alley, I would have run the other way. But I knew that he wasn't going to do anything because the press, everyone was there. So I just stood up and basically gave him a mouthful about being.
And so he was wise enough not to do anything.
Yeah.
So he was professional enough, I guess, then. So that's, I mean, amazing stories, Graham. It's just like, I don't know what to say about this. Just going back to the photography, I mean, you've done basically a lot. Is there anything else that you think, oh, I wish I could do that, because you've covered so many different subjects and themes and areas?
Right now, I really do wish I could get back to shoot anything. I mean, I would just kill to shoot anything right now, because business, as you know, business for all of us is just, it's just horrible. It's just went off a cliff. So right now, it's kind of interesting because it really makes you take stock and think about what you've been doing and what you want to do in the future. Because right now, it's just the case of all of us just really just waiting for, not only obviously in Hong Kong, we've had the threefold problem. We had the China-US trade war, then we had the protests and then riots, and then we had the virus. So we've had a triple whammy here. We've had three massive things that have just curtailed most forms of business. And me, like all my colleagues, all photographers and videographers, and there's just no work at the moment. So we're all just hoping that work slowly.
So how is this different than, let's say, 9/11?
9/11 is different because it's very different. For me, the virus is not the problem. The virus will be contained. The problem here is, which we didn't have after 9/11, is the social problems in Hong Kong, the protesters and the government not able to talk or listen to each other, the stalemate there, and just the ongoing. It's just horrible to see Hong Kong plummeting into this downward spiral of hate and violence. And this is what I don't see a quick and easy answer to. The trade war will go away, the virus will go away. I think the social problems here in Hong Kong are the things that worry me most. And that's going to be the hindrance. That's going to be what drags Hong Kong down more, is just that inability for anyone to actually come up with some kind of, let's meet somewhere in the middle, or let's at least sit down and talk. No one's going to do that. Protesters don't have anyone, and the government aren't listening. And so for me, that's the sad future.
So have you taken photographs of the protest?
I haven't taken any of the protest. Last year, when the protests happened, we got the, you know, the tear gassing and all the rubber bullets. And for one, if you're a freelancer, all your gear is not insured, right? If it's a riot, if it's civil disturbance, whatever, all your gear is not insured. So you're going to get water cannons, tear gas, rubber bullets, all that stuff. If you get your gear ruined, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Second point is the fact that I think, unfortunately now, when you get situations like this, you've almost got as many journalists as you do protesters, and the amount of journalists you see on these protest marches is just thousands of them, ranging from 12-year-olds to, you know, all with their yellow vests on with press, and you know that most of them aren't press. And so you've got such a mass of people with phones, with cameras, with there's more cameramen, there's more reporters than there are protesters. So for me now, also, unless you've got an outlet, if I can't sell my pictures anywhere, I'm probably not going to go and shoot it. On top of the fact that, you know, again, like I said, I've got a family now, so again, I consider my family as well, and I don't want to go out and get shot and tear gassed or lose an eye, or because I've got a family to support now. So that's another factor that influences it. And just for me, there's just this overall sadness about what's going on in Hong Kong. This overall thing that just drags my heart down is to see how our beloved Hong Kong has gone. And it's traumatic just watching it spiral into this downward pit.
So what do you think will happen with photography here in Asia over the next few years, and not just Hong Kong specifically, but
well, photography as a profession has definitely got much more challenging to stay in the profession and make a good living, because with the advent of digital photography, like I said earlier, days of film, you had to actually have a really good skill about taking photographs, capturing moments, the technology of film. You had to know what you were doing. Now you don't have to know so much what you're doing, because the camera's going to take care of the technical part, and you're going to shoot 5,000 pictures a minute. You're going to get one. So now the barrier to enter this profession has just gone so low. Anyone can pick up a digital camera or a phone and become a photographer and go and report on these protests and get a yellow jacket with press on it, and call themselves a press photographer. So with the advent of the web, the value of pictures went down. Magazines, far less magazines, newspapers around, so there's less outlets for your work as a photographer. So it's much more difficult now to make a living in this profession than it was, like, say, 20 years ago.
So where do you see the opportunities for yourself then? The competition is way higher, as you mentioned. Everyone can just upload pictures, phone, digital cameras. So where do you see for yourself opportunity? Let's say everything clears up, the COVID-19 disappears. So where do you see your future in photography?
Well, my future is I think it's I've been here. I've been in Hong Kong 30 years, so I've got a pretty good reputation in my profession because I've been here 30 years, and I've got a lot of contacts. And my photography is always my strata is it's like the high end, the high end corporate commercial stuff, the stuff that you can't hire an 18-year-old with a phone to go and shoot. You need someone who knows what they're doing. If you're going to go and shoot the CEO of a big multinational corporation, and you're going to have 3 minutes to do it, and you've got to go in, you've got to set up lights, you've got to work out where you've got to do it, you've got to manage the temperament of the CEO or the head of state or whoever it is. You've got to do all this, and you've got to do it under pressure. You've got to do it quickly. You're not going to hire an 18-year-old with a phone, right? You're still going to hire a experienced, seasoned professional. So my area that's my area, and I just hope that can continue for a few more years. I think it's getting tougher. I'm also, all my work is pretty much it's on location, so I don't do much studio. A lot of studio work now. A lot of studio photographers are going under because there's no work at the moment, and the overheads are too high, and also the fact that I think in more and more stuff will be done by computer graphics. Will be doing more like pack shots and illustrating things that you would have shot before would now be CGI, or there would be done on computers. So that is also, I think, a dying business. So people are always going to need their wedding shot. They're always going to need their families done. They're going to need their live events covering. They're going to need their annual reports, maybe shot. So those areas, I think, are going to hopefully hold up for a while.
So, and what is the most? You mentioned it already a little bit, but what is the most misunderstood part of photography when you talk to clients?
Probably the fact that they say, "We need a shot done, so it'll take you 5 minutes." It'll take you 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you've got to schlep 10 kilos of gear to the back of Beyond, set up, scatter around, set up. It's pouring with rain. There's been an earthquake and a volcano's gone off over there, and they say, yeah, just it's take you 5 minutes. Why are you charging me that? It's going to take you 5 minutes. So and then you turn up and you shoot it, and then of course they want the volcano taken out. They want that mountain moved over there, and they want their boss. They want their boss to look like Brad Pitt, and then of course the answer is Photoshop. Photoshop. Whatever the problem is, whatever the problem you encounter while shooting, the answer for the client is Photoshop. And of course they don't want to pay for it. they don't want to pay for you to spend a week in Photoshop. So
I've got a final question for you, Graham. So who would you rather have a dinner conversation with? With Bill Clinton or Carrie Lam? And why?
Bill Clinton or who? KLM. KLM.
Carrie Lam, not KLM. Well, KLM.
I thought you meant the Dutch airline. I was like, Dutch airline, definitely. I love it. I love aircraft. And I used to work for the designer that designed KLM's logo, Henryan.
Oh, you did?
Mr. Henryan. He not Henry Stein, Henryan of Henryan Ludlow Schmidt. He designed KLM's logo, like 60, 70 years ago or something. So I worked for him when I first left art college.
No. The dinner conversation is either Bill Clinton or Carrie Lam.
Oh my God! Oh my God! That's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's a no-brainer. Carrie Lam, absolutely.
Why?
My God. Well, I just really, I could, I'd really want to sit down with her and explain to her what she should have done back in June, just shocking for me, shocking what's happened here and how the government have played it. I know it's not all, they don't have a free hand, but they could have done so much more to make a better outcome for Hong Kong people, for the Hong Kong government, and for Beijing. They could have done so much better job, and but the opportunities has been missed. So absolutely, I could spend a couple of days with Carrie Lam.
Okay, all right. On that final comment, Graham, I'd like to thank you for all your time. It's been absolutely amazing hearing your stories, and it's interesting because I've known you for quite a few years, but I've never actually, maybe I'd never asked you, but I just never knew the details about all the stories. It's just fantastic.
Well, that's because I can normally never get a word in edgeways with you, Oscar. That's why. No, it's great. It's great. No, I love that fire extinguisher, by the way, on your backdrop. I was going to say I put a bit of eye candy in here for you because I know you're interested in photography. I know your father was a photographer, and I know that you love photography. So I put a bit of eye candy in here for you, and I'm wondering, is that fire extinguisher eye candy for me?
Yes. It's a funny story because I was looking at my screen. I was thinking, oh, my space is really white. So what can I find around me? And that was this thing. That's the only reason why I've got it there.
Well, that shows you are a visual person. It shows you were thinking about your backgrounds, which are important, right? Backgrounds are as important as the subject you're shooting. I love the yellow cloth there, positioned in front of the fire extinguisher. It's great.
I'm glad you noticed it. I made an effort because I thought, Graham's going to look at this.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it. I really do appreciate that. You put thought into that background.
All right, thanks a lot, Graham.
Thanks, Oscar.
Bye.
See you.